Welcome to our team's reflection video number 2. We chose to focus on week 4, the state of the world cities. My name is Deborah Kohara.
I'm Diego Loa.
I'm Sammy Villafranca.
And I'm Hector Espericueta.
All right, so we're just gonna get started into the introduction and go over a little bit of what we'll be speaking about today. So the first set of slides, we are going to be discussing how the world can better its cities. The first report is covered by the UN Habitat. It expresses the state of the world city by centering the timeline of the years 2010 to 2011. The second portion will be on how climate is involved. Um, IPCC details the climate change in 2022 and discusses the impact and vulnerability as well as adaptation that climate change has had on our environment. Going on to portion 3, we will highlight megacities, how megacities are changing the world and how we can make a change. Resources and important information assist us to understand how big cities are shaping and affecting the globe. Articles and additional materials inform us on solutions to fix the damaged world that has been created, that has been impacted by the damages. Just to give a summarization of the state of the world's cities by UN Habitat, this report gives details on multiple subjects and addresses challenges cities face due to a number of underlying issues. It focuses on the years 2010 and 2012, with mentions of previous years to use in comparison. The report also expresses how we can overcome difficulties and how we can move forward to thrive better as a society. As the cities around the globe continue to grow and face both long-standing as well as emerging challenges, this timely report offers valuable insights that can shape the future research, lead policy discussions, and support sustainable development planning. The challenges urbanization throws at the cities of the world can be discussed as defined as urbanization began to rise again. However, this left cities with issues like grinding poverty, environmental degradation, income inequality, and historical socioeconomic inequalities. The report also deep dives into urban divide. Urban divide is the face of injustice and a symptom of systematic dysfunction. A society cannot be harmonious or unified if mass amount of individuals cannot meet their basic needs, while others live in lavishness. How policymakers' choice can make or break cities, and how we can change for better. The city, as well as the policymakers, make good and bad decisions. However, bad decisions can affect a community. Listening to a hurting community can make changes, and making changes is a key development to a thriving city.
Yeah, so in the article, Climate Change 2022 Impacts, Adaptations, and Vulnerability, it talks about the adapting to climate change and how ecosystems are changing their biodiversity. Some species are shifting land ranges, and also there's also species extinction and disrupting carbon and water cycles. This is all caused by the increase of heat temperatures in the atmosphere, and also oceans are warming and increasing sea levels, and this causes for the changes of weather like storms, hurricanes, and like I guess bigger waves that crash into the shores, and this all changes environments in our ecosystems. Also, the increasing of annual rainwater has increased over the years, and there's also longer times of droughts that spans over a couple of months, and this affects the global food crops, and this decreases our, I guess, a food supply, and also the cities that are being flooded from all the increase of rainwater and the rise of sea levels get infrastructure damages through if it's either housing, transportation, and energy, and the affected water systems. The heat waves and like temperature rises also affects our health, and the way it affects our health is by like, causing respiratory issues and like malnutrition from the crops that we eat. And there's also food insecurities and forest fires that is impacted by this change. And around the world, like Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America, all affected by the increase of forest fires, our water supply in fresh water, and our food supply. And this article essentially says that we have to plan ahead while we can before climate change affects us more in the long term, which is already affecting us, but we have to start making changes. Yeah.
So our first additional resource is an article called Integrating Solutions to Adapt Cities for Climate Change. So cities today are dealing with a lot of climate challenges, things like rising water, heat, more extreme weather events. And so these require solutions that address all of these issues instead of isolating the problems. So for example, if we had green roofs or expand urban forests, that doesn't just help with cooling, but it also makes cities more enjoyable to live in, especially in the summertime. And then at the same time, we still need our traditional gray infrastructure, which is like our engineering, and we still need our green infrastructure, which is ecology. And so for these strategies to succeed, the support has to come from different sectors of the government and community working together. So some of our key takeaways from this article were that we need to find connected solutions instead of working in individual silos. And then we need to make sure that equity is a big part of the conversation so that these solutions are benefiting all aspects of the community, especially those that are more vulnerable. And then finally, the most effective strategies will come with blending nature with technology.
Yeah, so in the article, What are the Solutions to Climate Change by Jeff Turrentine? It says mostly that we have to stop depending on fossil fuels. We use a lot of fossil fuels, and this could come in the form of oil, gas, coal, any resources that we use a lot often. And the way we combat this is by using renewable energy. And we can use solar, wind, geothermal, and hydro energy. Alternatives like hydro dams and solar panels, they can also help, and also like windmills. This reduces, I guess, the emissions we put out into the atmosphere, and also the way we also combat this is by going through electrical vehicles instead of using gas-powered vehicles. It's a great alternative, and also the way we use our building codes in all these cities is we could, I guess, change the way we build stuff, because when we're building, we also use a lot of energy when it comes to equipment and the way we make our material, and we could reduce emissions release by building greenhouse gas, I guess, rooftops, and also some of the industrial solutions, coming up with new ways to make new materials like steel and cement, which is the most, I guess, materials that you use often when building buildings, and also technological innovations. We could develop them so we could use it in our research when combating climate change. And the key point of this article is that we are the ones that make the difference, and we have to come together to start making policy changes and come together now before um, it affects our, I guess, health and overall climate. Thank you.
All right, so to sort of flip the narrative on climate change and all the massive effects and impacts that they cause, on the upside, megacities are changing the world as we begin to look into the futuristic outlook and predictions. And so essentially, Parag highlights that urbanism is key to connectivity. So as these megacities are beginning to develop and become more vast, they're connecting everything from the economy, society, and political standpoint. And this shifts its reshaping of how countries allocate resources, and then they propose the infrastructure and engage in global interactions. So essentially, there's a bigger sense of cooperation, and there's a bigger movement for highlighting and trying to find solutions and be more efficient in handling the situations of climate change and emissions. And then, so the second key point is the changing of power and influence. So instead of the countries being the main role, megacities are taking that lead in trade, innovation, and connectivity. And so essentially they're beginning to make that shift of having, different nations cooperate without even the government of those nations cooperating, which kind of reshapes how everything has been looked at as far as that goes. And then the third point is that challenges in infrastructure and governance. So as they grow, they strain water, energy, housing, transportation, and government. So essentially, they're part of the problem of climate change, but in a sense that facing these challenges together will require everyone and a bigger movement and a bigger motivation into taking action with adaptive planning and handling the inequality of the climate and rapid change that this would occur.
So our final additional resource is a survey of urban climate change experiments in 100 cities. So this study looked at 627 different climate projects across 100 cities worldwide. And what's really interesting is that these cities were becoming testing grounds for new ideas. And so they were able to try out fresh policies and technologies on a smaller scale to see what the effect would be on a large scale. So the research found that climate action is happening both in developed and developing countries, but the approaches are looking pretty different depending on the local context. So that means that while a solution would be helpful in one city, it's not always going to be helpful across the world. And so we can look at this and take away some key points. So the cities are like test labs. They're leading the way by experimenting with different climate solutions. And by experimenting with the actual cities, we're able to see what the real world effects would be on the communities and the people that live in those cities. Um, Second point is these small projects teach us a lot and sometimes inspire much bigger changes. So being able to implement different changes in a small local community that works effectively, that could help us implement those changes into a different city that has a similar climate, similar context, but is a much larger city. And so finally, we also need to look into strong urban leadership because, like we mentioned in the first article, collaboration between governments and local communities is very important for urban climate action to be effective.
All right, and then to conclude with our three main resources that we used, essentially the first takeaway is that UN Habitat discusses these challenges that cities face, like poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. And so they're basically forewarning us about the dangers of urban divide and emphasize how these decisions from policymakers can strengthen communities or worsen these issues. And so the report is essentially providing a layout to sustainable development and greater urban planning. And then the second source, the IPCC, is emphasizing the urgent impacts that climate change, like biodiversity loss, rising sea levels, and threats to human health and infrastructure. And though these adaptations exist, they have their limitations. So IPCC is also conveying another message that the immediate global action is needed in order to reduce these emissions and better create sustainable solutions. And then the third source is essentially highlighting that cities must adapt integrated situation strategies to handle climate risks. And in doing so, the adaptive engineering must include nature-based solutions and benefit all of the communities. And so the authors stress that the collaboration and combining of technologies is key to develop lasting sustainable cities. So essentially, to conclude everything, all these three articles are highlighting the main message that we need better, more sustainable solutions, and we need to have a better and stronger foundation for when we're looking into the future into reducing these emissions and the overall climate change.
And then here are our works cited. Thank you.